2020. I wonder what you'll remember about that year 10 years, 20 years from now. Someone I heard described 2020 as a year that will be remembered as a year to forget. It seems like a year that has gone by very quickly on the one hand and very slowly on the other. And especially I think this year government and governments have been in the spotlight. It all began, didn't it, back in March of this year as our own government, along with governments around the world, struggled to know how to respond to a pandemic that was beginning. We were all watching as announcements were made forcing a lockdown on the country, as many people lost their jobs, their livelihoods, as we were restricted from meeting with other people, as the government tried to do what they thought was best to deal with the problem of illness. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a government who could really deal with illness, and not just this one illness but all illness, so that the prospect of death might be removed forever? If you've been watching the news in recent months at all, you'll also have seen the American election in the spotlight, not just in recent months but as it tends to be throughout the whole of the last year. We saw a country that was deeply divided over their president. It seems not so much as an election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, but between Donald Trump and not Donald Trump. He seems to be a character that people either love or hate. And even since that election, we see a country that is deeply divided. And even though there's talk now of wanting to unite the country, we know that that is a prospect that is very unlikely at all. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a government who could create real unity and peace, where people related well with one another, who cared for one another, who weren't just concerned about getting their own way or having things the way that they want, but where people worked for the good of others? And as the prospect of Brexit now looms only a week away, we've seen for the last year and more a desire of a country to be independent, to be free from what it sees as the shackles of others, the shackles of rules of other nations. That desire for independence. But you know, all of these things that we face, all of these struggles of illness, of division, of wanting to be independent, they all find their origins in a garden. The Garden of Eden, where humankind rebelled against their God, went their own way, and as a result the world in which we live is broken. And no government, no matter how hard it tries, can restore things to the way they were meant to be. There's no government that can deal with the problem of illness. There's no government that can restore peace and tranquility, where people all relate well to one another all of the time. There's no government that can deal with the problem of our human hearts, who want to be free to do as we want and not to conform to the desires of others. But earlier we read from Isaiah chapter 9. And Isaiah chapter 9 points forward to a future government or rule that will achieve all of these things. And that government wouldn't be by some great political leader or some rich person who's made their fortune. It would be resting on the shoulders of a little baby who would be born. You see, when Isaiah wrote these words, the nations of Judah and Israel were in crisis. Their king had died, their good king, and the prospect for the future didn't look good at all. They were frightened, they were filled with fear, and here was a promise of a future government that they could look forward to and trust in and rely upon. And this government would deal with the problem of illness forever. Not just one illness, but all illness, where it would all be removed and taken away. This king would deal with the problem of division. where he would create a kingdom that was united under the one king who wanted to live at peace with him and with others. Here would be a king from whom people wouldn't be seeking their independence, but where they would willingly come and submit to the rule of the king because they knew that he was one who could be trusted. As we look back on 2020 and all the problems that it's brought, and how perhaps within us there's a longing for better government, for a government different to the things that we see both in our own country and around the world, let's look to Isaiah's promise of a baby who would be born, the baby whose birth we celebrate at Christmas, who would bring in a kingdom and a rule that would deal with illness, that would remove division, and would change our longing to be independent of God, to be those who gladly and willingly walk in his ways.